Hi guys, this is the second part of my late summer wrap-up in which I talk about 3 more books that I have read since the end of July. After this wrap-up, I've been thinking I'm going to change my habit to a recent reads kind of thing, which I'm going to do roughly every 2 weeks. But on to the books. The first one that I'd like to talk about is Zone 1, which continues my Colson Whitehead reading journey. This one was published in 2011 and it is a zombie novel, but one that takes place well after the zombie apocalypse. Things have calmed down a little bit and people are now preparing to take back certain areas from the zombies. The military have annihilated most of the zombies that had taken over Manhattan, and now civilian teams are sent in to inspect the buildings and neutralize the remaining zombies that were, in one way or another, trapped inside the buildings. In this version of the zombie apocalypse, there are 2 versions of zombies. There are the normal ones, the usual rabid ones who run around and try to bite people and spread the disease. But in addition to that, there are also the so-called stragglers, a seemingly harmless brand of zombies who seem to be frozen in time and who have retired to one spot which seems to have some significance, to have had some significance in their earlier life, and they are now forever frozen in one activity in that one spot, and nobody really knows what this is all about. We, the reader, follow the protagonist Mark Spitz around with one of those civilian teams. They have been sent into an area called Zone 1 in Manhattan, which they are supposed to clean up. And they have been sent there by, together with several other civilian units and army units, by the survivor camp in Buffalo, from where the repopulation of Manhattan is supposed to take place. The whole book takes place over the course of one weekend, or rather from one Friday to Sunday, but only about 1/3 of the book actually takes place in the present tense of the story. The other 2/3 are flashbacks to the time of the night of the zombie apocalypse, and then we follow Mark Spitz's experiences thereafter. How he escaped from the marauding zombies and was on the run for several months, and the people who he met when he was on the run, until he finally got to the half-mythical survivor camp in Buffalo. This all sounds awfully adventurous and fast-paced, but this is really this is as slow as they come, this book, I'd say. This is one of those zombie books that focus more on the people than on the zombies and on the action. Like The Road, for example, but whereas The Road is a look into the personal abysses of humans, this book is a rather biting and merciless social satire. It pokes fun at humanity and society by depicting a post-zombie apocalyptic society in which nothing has really changed, and already a few months after the apocalypse, corporations have taken over again by controlling everyday life to a large degree. And then the book also highlights how people were in fact zombies well before the zombie apocalypse. The zombies in the book rather uncannily resemble people doing their 9-to-5 jobs, people doing their grocery shopping, and people doing all kinds of everyday life activities. This is by no means an original idea, but still the way Colson Whitehead does it in this book just struck a chord with me, because this is exactly my kind of super dry humor. I'm not sure if it is a book for everyone though, because it is super slow, and if the writing style is not your kind of writing, then I don't think it would be very enjoyable. I'd say if this has made you curious, just go and look at a preview, and if you like the writing style, then I'm sure you'll enjoy this book, because it is all about the style and the humor. So even though I don't think it is the most original of zombie novels, I still think it is one of the best that there is, at least for me. And then the next book is a rather weird one, and I was only aware of its existence because it was shortlisted for the Booker Prize in 2016. It is His Bloody Project by Graeme Macrae Burnet. This is a historical novel that comes disguised as a compilation of actual historical documents pertaining to the court case against one Roderick Macrae, a fictitious family member of Macrae's, the author Macrae's, who committed a triple murder in his Highland crofting village in 1869 when he was 17 years old. So the documents that are compiled in this book, are a lengthy testimony written by Roderick Macrae in prison, in which he explains how and why he was driven to commit the murders. We have several witness statements. We have the post-mortems on the victims' bodies. We have a statement of a specialist in criminal psychology, or what passed as criminal psychology at the time, and we have the transcripts of the trial. The accused's lawyer had him plead not guilty on account of insanity, and because of that he had him write that testimony, and he also called in that specialist to look at him and to testify in court. I have to say I found this book pretty boring. For one, the story of how Macrae was driven to commit these murders, whether it is the whole truth and nothing but the truth or not, the story is pretty straightforward. And if you know anything at all about history and the conditions of crofters in the 1800s, or actually of tenant farmers anywhere, you know pretty much from the get-go where the story is going to end, and nothing and no one in the story was in any way surprising. And then the seemingly unending trial transcript. We pretty much hear the same story again through witness statements. So the first and the second half of the book are more or less the same, and the points in which the witness statements diverge from Macrae's own story are extremely few and far between. And in the end, I was just glad that it was over. I can see why this book was shortlisted for the Booker Prize, because it, well, the idea is certainly original, but there is no way on earth that it could have won against any of the other shortlisted books, in my opinion. And then my last book, it is hard to talk about coherently if I have only a few sentences to do so. It is Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. This is basically the story of how the narrator and protagonist destroys the lives of the men that he has affairs with through his self-loathing and denial, and a ruthlessness that comes from a misguided instinct of self-preservation. In the beginning of this book, we hear that Giovanni is about to be executed, and the book then tells the story of how we got to that point. The narrator, an American, has spent several months in Paris and has met Giovanni in a gay bar where he has accompanied a friend, even though he has more or less convinced himself that he isn't actually gay, although he has a history. He and Giovanni then embark on a passionate affair in which the narrator is never fully comfortable, though. And then his girlfriend announces her return to Paris and that she is actually prepared to accept his proposal. So that gives the narrator a chance and an excuse to get out of the ill-fated relationship. And that leaves Giovanni lonely and desperate, and also materially destitute, and it all goes downhill quickly from there, for both of them actually. I adored this book for so many reasons. Just one of them, just as an example, is the character of the girlfriend, and that was such a pleasant surprise. It would have been easy, I guess, to paint her as the villain, because if it wasn't for her and for her return to Paris, the narrator wouldn't have had an excuse to get out of the relationship. So in a sense, she does come between him and Giovanni. or at least it would have been easy to frame it this way, but that doesn't happen, and the girlfriend is actually a pretty great character, perhaps the best character in the book. And then, of course, the writing. The writing was just phenomenal, but I can't quite put my finger on what it was about the style that was so phenomenal and that conveyed such a depth of feeling and that was so captivating. I only know that I want to read every book that James Baldwin has written. I have already bought If Beale Street Could Talk, which is surprisingly slim, just like this one. And I also bought In Another Country, which is surprisingly chunky. These two are certainly on my short-term TBR, and I am so glad that I have finally discovered James Baldwin. He is somehow not what I expected, although I didn't even have expectations. You know that how that happens sometimes. So that's it for now. I hope what you're reading is just as good, and I'll see you very soon with another video. Bye!